Welcome as we resume our journey toward a more compassionate life. We have come a long way on our journey already. We have learned about compassion, about how the old brain influences our lives, and how we can overcome its influence by practicing the four immeasurables: loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. We have looked at ourselves and our own world, understanding how important it is to think outside the box, and, inspired by the hero myth, to strive to make our world more compassionate. We have learned to be compassionate toward ourselves, accepting ourselves shadow and all, and freeing ourselves to turn outward toward others. We have learned the transforming power of empathy and attempted to apply it. We have learned to practice mindfulness, being detached observers of our actions and feelings, so as to understand ourselves better, perhaps to change and grow. We have seen how powerful even small acts of kindness can be, and how important it is to avoid unkind actions and remarks. And we have come to know how little we know of others, and even of our world, and consequently to be open to the unknowable, the numinous in ourselves and others. Now, we are ready to take the eighth step, learning how we should speak to one another. Are you ready? There are two very different ways to speak to another person. One is called the debate mode. Think of a legal trial with prosecution and defense. The other is dialogue mode. Think of people discussing how to cooperate in solving a problem. In debate mode, people confront each other, each holding fast to a point of view and defending it against the other. Each listens to the other only in order to refute. The only way to resolve a debate is through a verdict by a third party, a judge, resulting in a winner and a loser. But no one really grows, do they? No one really changes. In dialogue mode, people stand side by side together, confronting a problem to be solved. Each listens not to refute, but to understand. Argument is not intended to win, but to win over, to bring about a meeting of minds. Each person in dialogue is able to change. And through dialogue, all can grow. The ancient Greek master of dialogue was Plato's hero, Socrates. A Socratic dialogue begins where a person is, usually in a state of relative ignorance. Then, with gentle questions without a trace of blame or shame, Socrates would guide that person to ever deeper insight, to growing knowledge and wisdom, and so to change. But here's the challenge of Socratic dialogue. I must myself be open to change, to admit I could be wrong, and may be in need of guidance toward wisdom by the very person with whom I dialogue. The challenge of dialogue can be much greater if we're trying to dialogue with a person who is not willing to listen to other points of view, especially someone who angrily repulses anything that raises a question to her beliefs. Karen Armstrong refers especially to fundamentalists. She recognizes that what looks like stubborn confidence in a fundamentalist is more likely rooted in fear. Fear of spiritual ruin, of personal damnation, or just as likely, an apocalyptic fear that divine wrath will strike the world because of some imagined sin. We know from our discussion of the old brain what happens if you poke at someone who is dominated by fear. Fury, as Karen Armstrong says, attacked fundamentalists' fear turns to rage. So, how can we approach such a person in order to dialogue? Very carefully. Look beneath the rigidity and anger and recognize the fear there. Empathize. I'm so sorry if I've made you angry. What is it, though, that makes you so angry? Is it really that you are afraid of something? Help the person to explore the cause of her fear. What is it that makes you so afraid? Can I help? If that strategy works, you have transformed a hostile confrontation, debate mode, into a dialogue in which you are together, seeking to understand. That means change is possible in the person, opening, freeing. But you will likely be changed as well. Good luck. However, the call to empathy does not mean accepting injustice. Still, resistance to injustice can also be compassionate and loving. Let Mahatma Gandhi's question guide you. Are you seeking to win, to make this person a loser? Or are you seeking to win this person over so you are both better for your encounter? Be guided by Martin Luther King Jr.'s words. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. The road we travel is one of compassion. Our effort to speak to one another with love leads us to the next step toward compassion. Concern for everybody. Think back to our first step along this path, when we face the old brain and the 4 F's that are part of every one of us. Recognizing how fear dominates the old brain and poking at fear releases fury. There is a social form of this old brain called tribalism. A whole group of people, in effect, place themselves under a defensive shell, and just as the old brain has its important survival function, so tribalism had its place in the evolution of society. But its disadvantages now far outweigh its value. For tribalism draws a circle to keep us safe on the inside. But in our crowded world, that means we shove them to the outside. And tribalism builds a thick wall to keep them out. In our complex society, tribalism shows up in forms of otherizing, rooted in fear, causing injustice, and encouraging hatred through prejudice, and then discrimination, and then persecution, and at its worst, destructive war. We know that pattern only too well from the last century. It would be extreme folly and extreme tragedy to repeat it in this century. So, how do we let go of the tribalism that lurks within us? We can draw from what we learned in the 5th step, mindfulness. Notice how you and those around you speak of foreigners and minorities. Is it us and them language, otherizing? From our seventh step, recognize how little we know about so many other people, and so how cautious we must be in making any kind of judgment. Look beyond news headlines. Know there is always more to the story, people who deserve our empathy. Look around you and notice how much you depend on the work and inventiveness of others. The food we eat from so many different places, handcrafted goods, furniture, clothing. We have so much to be grateful for, and so many to be grateful to. Of course, if you say these things out loud, be prepared to draw from the step we just discussed and aim for constructive dialogue. Good luck. Karen Armstrong tells us that letting go of tribalism is a spiritual process, living one's tradition as insight. She points to the story of Muhammad, not replacing, but taking his place among the prophets and patriarchs of other religions in the presence of God. Such concern for everybody is dramatically expressed by a follower of Muhammad, a Sufi who lived in the late 12th and early 13th centuries, Ibn Arabi. My heart has opened unto every form. It is a pasture for gazelles, a cloister for Christian monks, a temple for idols, the Kaaba of the pilgrim, the tablets of the Torah, and the book of the Quran. I practice the religion of love. Opening our hearts to concern for everybody prepares us for the 10th step toward compassion. Knowledge. Begin with ourselves. We tend to have an idealized view of our own people and tradition. Strive for a balanced knowledge of your own tradition, including its shadow side. Here we see, for instance, the noble crusaders in their holy war to defend the Christian faith as they conquer and sack the Christian city of Constantinople in the early 13th century. Such noble greed and bloodlust in the heritage of Christian lives in many memories of the Near East. Next, when you have reached a sober awareness of your own tradition, seek thorough knowledge of another culture and tradition, one other, to keep your quest manageable. Study that culture carefully. Stereotypes may fall away. Appreciation may rise and grow. Now apply the 4 immeasurables to people of that culture and tradition: loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, equanimity. Your quest for knowledge may change you. Be ready for change. Welcome change. Now, your journey toward compassion has opened your mind to a larger universe, to greater wisdom, and a growing capacity for compassion. Karen Armstrong concludes her chapter on the 10th step, knowledge, with a poem from early Buddhism. Let us cherish all creatures as a mother her only child. May our loving thoughts fill the whole world, above, below, across, without limit. Our love will know no obstacles. A boundless goodwill toward the whole world, unrestricted, free of hatred or enmity. Now only 2 steps remain in our journey toward a more compassionate life.